The first to give birth should be my daughter. Don't you dare have a child until my daughter is married.
That's what Evelyn, my mother-in-law, said as she kicked my pregnant belly. Despite being a mother herself, it seems Evelyn knows nothing about him. The one who's really scary when angered isn't me. It's actually my husband, Andrew. My name is Amelia. I'm 38 years old. A cherished name given by my parents. I've always tried to live my life with positivity, but there was one time, the only time in my life, when I couldn't feel optimistic. It was back in my late 20s. When I decided to marry my now husband Andrew and visited his home for the first time. Even before going, "Be prepared, my parents are a bit odd," Andrew had warned me. But I, too carefree, thought it wouldn't be that big of a deal.
"What? My parents are pretty out there too, quite the handful."
That's how I responded. However, within minutes of arriving at his parents' home, I realized how naive I had been. Upon seeing me, Evelyn, my mother-in-law, frowned and said,
"Bringing home some unknown woman all of a sudden, and to get married before Ella?
What are you thinking, Andrew?" I was dumbfounded when Andrew suddenly got scolded.
"If you keep saying that, I'll never be able to get married."
And Andrew replied to Evelyn with a reluctant sigh. It turns out Evelyn had hoped that Ella, Andrew's sister, would marry before him.
It's only natural for the firstborn to marry first.
She had a strong fixation on this. It would make some sense if my sister-in-law Ella had a boyfriend or something. But she has barely left her room since middle school. According to Andrew, after Ella made fun of a friend's looks and turned her into a laughingstock, she herself got ostracized by her peers. She then declared,
"People can't be trusted, they're the worst,"
and stopped going to school altogether. The problem lies with Evelyn and the late father-in-law, Samuel. They doted on Ella so much.
"There's no need to go to a place with such horrible classmates. We'll support you for life."
That they comforted her with. Ella took those words to heart, or rather, enjoyed them too much, and to this day, at 30, still receives an allowance from her parents, buying comics and games online to enjoy in her room. The only time she goes out is for anime events. Of course, the money for that also comes from her parents' wallets, and she doesn't work. What? What about living expenses? Of course, her parents pay for everything. Did Samuel's inheritance go to Ella? Apparently, the house caught fire several years before Samuel passed away, and most of the savings were used up in moving and other expenses. Evelyn, with hardly any assets left, refuses to work. She never gets out from her room. How Evelyn plans to continue taking care of Ella is a mystery. Anyway, Evelyn continues to spoil her. Since childhood, she doted on Ella and nearly neglected Andrew, who says,
"If I wait for Ella to marry, I'll be more than just old, I'll be a skeleton."
And so, Andrew had no intention of waiting for her marriage. Well, that's true. Evelyn was strongly opposed to our marriage, but Andrew had intended to marry regardless of opposition. He brought me home out of a sense of duty to report as an adult, not intending to listen to her complaints. Instead,
"Well, that's the situation, so I'm getting married."
He ignored Evelyn's complaints and unilaterally declared our marriage. Naturally, she vehemently refused to attend our wedding.
"Don't worry, I wasn't planning on inviting you anyway."
But Andrew also said. While I wondered if this was okay, I also felt that if we were to marry, there was no other way. And so, after getting married, we hardly ever returned to the in-laws' house or participated in anything like family gatherings. Evelyn herself doesn't seem to mind since she cares about Ella but not so much about Andrew. We also felt more at ease about it. But then one day, I was notified that Evelyn had collapsed at a store during shopping and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. I tried calling the in-laws' house, registered as her home number on her mobile phone, but no one answered, and it seemed our home was listed as the next contact. There's no way Ella wouldn't be at the in-laws' house. Typical of her, she probably pretending not to be home. Completely hopeless. It seems Evelyn had a myocardial infarction and needed surgery, so they were seeking familial consent. In a panic, I contacted Andrew, got his permission for the surgery, and then rushed to the hospital. Evelyn was unconscious for about 3 days after the surgery, but on the 4th day, she woke up, and by the 5th day, she was able to converse with the nurses. When we were informed by the nurses that she had been moved from the ICU to a regular room, we brought some clothes for her, but why is a stranger visiting me?
What?
Upon seeing me and Andrew, Evelyn didn't thank us but instead snapped at us. We didn't want to visit her either. But it's not like we have a choice when Ella wouldn't step out of the house for anything. Andrew was of the mindset that there's no need for us to visit her, was the stance. Thinking it would only cause trouble and be a hassle since we'd likely be unwelcome. But Ella refuses to go to places with lots of people like hospitals. Moreover, we had to talk through the door because she wouldn't come out of her room. Naturally, Andrew yelled,
"In such an emergency, you could at least cooperate with the family. You can go to anime events, so you should be able to go to the hospital."
But it had no effect. She just went silent, and the conversation ended there. So, reluctantly, we ended up visiting Evelyn in Ella's place. Andrew, infuriated by Evelyn's rudeness, told me,
"You don't have to visit her anymore. Just leave her in dirty clothes every day."
But that's hardly appropriate. It's a shared room, and dirty clothes would be a nuisance to the other patients and nurses. Since Andrew works during the day, I'm the only one who can bring her clothes to the hospital on weekdays. So I
don't really want to, but I'll bear with it and go to the hospital,"
told Andrew. Andrew looked genuinely sorry.
"If you ever get too fed up, just throw the clothes somewhere and run back home without going to the hospital,"
he said, but I thought, let's do my best as his wife. However, every time I showed up at the hospital, Evelyn would say,
"The nurse said my daughter was here, and I thought it was Ella, but it's you, a stranger."
She complained about not considering me her daughter, and how seeing my face made her feel worse, saying whatever she pleased. It was clear to me that this was harassment, especially since Evelyn knows very well that Ella wouldn't come to the hospital. There was even a time when she threw the things I brought at me, almost hitting another patient, and I had to apologize. Of course, she didn't apologize. I was the one who kept apologizing. With her acting however she pleased.
"I don't feel like your daughter either, but I'm the only one looking after you now, so please bear with it,"
I retorted. Then Evelyn,
"Ella would never say such a thing. You and Andrew are really not endearing,"
exploded. Of course, the nurses scolded us, and I had to apologize again on behalf of Evelyn, who refused to, but the situation didn't escalate further. Is there really no way to deal with this selfish Evelyn? After a stressful month, finally she was discharged. With her out of the hospital, we returned to our peaceful days, and to our joy, we found out I was pregnant. Andrew was overjoyed. It's still small and knows nothing yet. But he would come every day, pressing his ear to my belly.
"Are you in there?"
asking. Thinking he's silly, yet I understand his excitement and am happy he's so delighted about our child. As a mom and as a wife, I'm determined to give birth to this child healthily. My parents were also thrilled when we announced the pregnancy, and it has become their weekend joy to look for baby socks and clothes, even though we don't know the gender yet, so don't buy anything. Although I mentioned it, I'm a bit worried they might end up buying both boys' and girls' clothes anyway. In the midst of everyone being elated about the new life, we didn't tell Evelyn about the pregnancy. It was Andrew who said it would be better that way.
Evelyn might start saying who knows what, being upset that her first grandchild would be my child, especially since we married before Ella.
He seemed concerned about my mental well-being. I thought it might be better to report after the baby is safely born and things have settled down. Andrew believes even that isn't necessary, but I figured we'd just play it by ear depending on the situation at the time. However, as the birth approached, Evelyn suddenly showed up at our house. I was contemplating pretending not to be home to avoid showing her my pregnant belly when my mobile phone rang with a call from Evelyn. It seems she heard the ringtone through an open window, as it was summer. Evelyn raised.
"Come out here, now."
Her voice. I usually keep my phone on silent mode, so why did I have the sound on today of all days? Cursing my luck, it was too late to do anything. With Andrew not home, I reluctantly opened the front door, and Evelyn squeezed through the slightly opened door.
"Why did you get pregnant?"
As soon as she saw me, Evelyn exploded in anger. Not even glancing at my belly. It was as if she had known about my pregnancy from the start, leaving me dumbfounded. Then,
"Some neighbor mentioned seeing you at the OBGYN, congratulating me on Andrew's wife being pregnant. What's there to celebrate?"
Evelyn fumed. So, she had learned of my pregnancy through someone else. Despite choosing a hospital far from the in-laws' house, she found out anyway. Seeing my slightly pale face, Evelyn said,
"It seems you do feel somewhat guilty for getting pregnant before Ella."
She gave a completely off-base response. I don't feel even a shred of such guilt.
"You should know, the first child to be born should be Ella's. We don't need a child from someone as shameless as you who doesn't understand family hierarchy."
Evelyn then suddenly kicked my belly. Unable to protect my belly completely, I crumpled to the ground from the shock and pain of the kick. What should I do? There's no severe pain, but I felt a flow of liquid in my lower body. As I tried to flee from Evelyn, she grabbed my collar.
"Understand this? The first to give birth should be Ella. Don't you dare have a child until Ella is married. Give up on giving birth."
Then she kicked me in the back. I felt an uncontrollable flow of liquid from deep within me. My water broke. Evelyn continued saying other things, but in my panic I couldn't listen, focusing solely on the emergency. Her leaving seemed like I was admitting guilt in her eyes as she spat out.
"Got it now? We don't need your child."
And left. Snapping back to reality at the sound of the door closing, I didn't know what to do. First, I had to check on my baby, so I called the hospital with trembling hands, rushed into a cab, and headed there. Unfortunately, Andrew was on a business trip for 2 days. His supposed supervisor had been hospitalized due to an accident, and with a shortage of staff, Andrew had to go. He tried to refuse, citing his pregnant wife, but they wouldn't listen, and he complained about it.
"It's okay. I can manage on my own for a couple of days. Don't worry and just go on your business trip."
I reassured him, now feeling extremely vulnerable. Tears streamed down my face from anxiety as I called Andrew, sobbing and explaining the situation. "Understood. Work doesn't matter at this point. You and the baby are what's important. I'm coming back right now, wait for me." Andrew returned by that evening, as he promised. There might have been complaints about him abandoning work. If they complain, I'm prepared to change jobs, so don't worry. But Andrew said, "I'm lucky to have such a wonderful husband." Fortunately, there were no issues with the baby, but given the proximity to the due date, we immediately prepared for birth. After the child was born safely, We should have been filled with happiness, but then Andrew said seriously,
"Just because the child was born safely doesn't mean I can forgive my mother's actions."
He was still furious about Evelyn's behavior on that day. Then came the fateful day. About a month after I was discharged from the hospital. From the morning, Andrew took me and our daughter, Grace, to the in-laws' house. He didn't ring the doorbell but instead used his key to enter. Evelyn, who appeared to have been watching TV, was startled by Andrew's.
"What? Why are you here all of a sudden? You should have told me you were coming."
Sudden appearance. It was understandable why she panicked. The usual calmness was gone from Andrew, who didn't glare at Evelyn but entered with a cold, emotionless expression, making a loud noise as he opened the door. It was an unusually rough manner for him. Ignoring Evelyn's protests, Andrew headed straight for Ella's room.
"What do you think you're doing?"
Evelyn followed him. Andrew stopped in front of Ella's room, took a breath, and then threw his body against the door. The room had been locked at Ella's request, so breaking the door seemed the only way in.
"Andrew, what are you doing?"
Evelyn panicked. Without a word, Andrew kicked the door down.
"Stop it!"
Evelyn tried to hold him back, but Andrew brushed her off without a word. After a few kicks, the door was about to give way, and with a final charge from Andrew, it fell inward. Ella, in dirty pajamas with overgrown bangs, looked up in shock.
"Come here."
Andrew grabbed Ella's hand and dragged her out of the room. Of course, Ella screamed,
"No, stop!"
But Andrew didn't listen. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes.
"Stop it! That's cruel!"
Evelyn sided with Ella, but her words didn't reach the furious Andrew. He threw Ella outside.
"Go outside for once,"
he shouted. Ella cried like a child, with Evelyn comforting her.
"Why would you do something so cruel?"
Evelyn raised her voice as if she were in the right.
"What? It's kindness. A woman over 30, not working, making her mom pay for her living expenses while cooped up in her room? That is not kindness. It's not your place to decide that. Then can mom make that decision? No, you won't. Can't you see it's unfortunate for Ella to live like this? What? After having a heart attack, you still don't get it? You won't live forever. Who will take care of Ella then? Someone who can't even look after herself. Will leave money behind. Your concern is unnecessary. Then who took care of mom's hospitalization? Ella just stayed home. Amelia did everything. She just did it because she wanted to. It's not my concern. Yeah, but who will look after Ella if something happens to her? We won't. Or does mom plan to live another 100 or 200 years to take care of her? That's... And how is a woman who stays in her room going to get married? The first to give birth has to be Ella. Are you out of your mind?
Andrew's words were too rational, leaving Evelyn looking at him in shock. She probably never thought deeply about it, believing she'd always be there to protect Ella.
Excuse my frankness,
I said, causing Evelyn to look at me with disdain.
If you and Samuel had properly guided Ella towards social reintegration, she might have already been married by now. But Samuel, now deceased, and you, allowed Ella to live without working, fulfilling all her desires, providing a life without hardships. She is now 30. It's almost too late for her to return to society, but postponing it further won't do her any favors. Job opportunities decrease with age, and without any special circumstances or social experience, she will have limited employment options. If you truly care for her, shouldn't you encourage her to go outside instead of letting her stay cooped up at home? It's only going to make things harder for her.
Evelyn's face turned red at my words.
You shut up,
she yelled.
Think becoming a mom makes you knowledgeable? I've raised 2 kids. I know much more about parenting than you. Don't meddle in family matters.
Seeing Evelyn gasping for breath in anger, Andrew scoffed.
Then it's a failure in parenting. You've raised a child who's stayed in her room till 30 without ever working, and 1 son who has disowned you. Let me make it clear, I do think Ella is also a victim here. Someone should have strictly corrected her when they knew the reason she started secluding herself, emphasizing it was her responsibility. It's okay, she will manage everything. Maybe it's indeed better for her to start working now, she's smart. She'll find a job soon enough,
Evelyn said, patting Ella's back. However, Ella looked pale.
No. Impossible,
and muttered. Andrew and I both were convinced it was hopeless. Evelyn must have realized it too.
As long as I'm here, you will be fine.
But she put on a brave face.
Humph. Well, good luck living happily with Ella, who probably won't get married in her lifetime. Just don't involve me from now on.
What? Evelyn's bewildered response was met with Andrew's mocking laughter.
What? You thought you'd make me take care of you when you're old, and Ella can continue living her spoiled life? You're clueless.
Evelyn was at a loss for words, apparently having exactly those thoughts.
Well, according to you, Ella is supposed to get married, so maybe her future husband can support both mom and her. Nice family plan there. We'll do our part by ourselves too,
Andrew said mockingly, his eyes not sharing the humor. Seeing this, Evelyn looked as though she was about to say it was over, her expression filled with despair.
You're thinking of disowning me? Your only mom? Only mom? Don't make me laugh. I hardly felt cared for. You made me do all the household chores while letting Ella do whatever she wanted since we were kids. And kicking Amelia's belly during her pregnancy, as if I could ever forgive you for not only attacking me but also my wife.
Andrew's sharp gaze silenced Evelyn, who just stared at him.
Let's go.
He placed a hand on my shoulder and said. Evelyn screamed after us.
Please, think it over.
But he didn't look back. After that, Evelyn tried reaching out multiple times through calls and visits.
Please, at least take care of Ella.
But he refused.
It's absurd for someone who hasn't lived properly to ask for help so easily.
Rejecting her with logical reasoning and keeping her at bay. Eventually, as our children grew, we moved away, leaving no contact information for her. We've completely cut ties. The last I heard, Ella couldn't stick to vocational training and was constantly fired from part-time jobs for being late or absent without notice. Shockingly, when Ella complained about being reprimanded for her lack of enthusiasm at one part-time job, considering it harassment, Evelyn went to the supermarket where she worked and shouted at them, thinking she was pitiable. It's likely Ella will never work properly.
We need to make sure she doesn't depend on us in the future.
Andrew and I agreed. The prospect of Ella living properly after Evelyn's gone is dubious, but thinking about it is too scary, so we try not to. Despite Evelyn's claims of leaving money and taking care of Ella for life, she ended up struggling financially. Even past 60, she worked part-time to support Ella. It should have been the other way around. It seems she finally realized she should have encouraged Ella to go out more, but it's too late. Evelyn feels the weight of having to carry Ella, who can't do anything for herself, for the rest of her life. As for me, after our first child, we quickly had a second one, and now we're a lively family of 5. Though I was worried at first, it turns out you can manage surprisingly well. Andrew helps with childcare and cooks 3 times a week. He might actually be better at cooking than me, and his repertoire of dishes seems to be larger than mine. He's also improved his baking skills, a hobby he started on his own, and recently, it's become common to see him in the kitchen with the kids on weekends. No matter how you look at it, he's a wonderful dad. However, it seems he's not good at cleaning. He's the type to clutter things up before realizing it, thinking if things are put together, they're tidy, and he struggles to decide what to throw away. So, I mainly handle the cleaning. It's nice that we can complement each other's weaknesses. Maybe it's because they see the way we live, but our children teach each other what they're good at, helping one another with their studies. Since no one can live alone, we need to support each other. I hope our family continues to support one another forever. I'm happy every day, surrounded by such a caring family.
Hey, let's do something special for Grandpa's birthday. Great idea. Let's make Grandpa's favorite curry and celebrate with everyone.
I laugh and agree with my grandson Joseph's suggestion. For the next few days, leading up to my husband Brian's birthday next week, Joseph had been taking lessons from me to master the art of making curry. Joseph, who had never cooked before, looked dangerously unsteady with a knife in hand, making me want to intervene, but I continued to watch over him diligently. Children grow up so fast, and within just a few days, Joseph had managed to cut ingredients to a decent size with the knife. Then, finally, Brian's birthday arrives. Please taste the curry Joseph spent a long time making. When I ask, my husband Brian takes a bite of the curry with a happy expression. He tilts his head slightly. Then, he stands up with the curry and heads straight to the bathroom. I frown, puzzled, and watch Brian's retreating back. A little time passes. When Brian comes back, I say with a slightly irritated expression,
Brian, that curry took 5 hours to make. Why did you pour it out? Apologize.
I spoke with a pout, but I was really angry. Even if there was dissatisfaction with the taste, was there really a need to throw it away? We could have added spices to adjust the flavor, or done something else with it. Brian looks at me in surprise. Did you eat this? No, I didn't. As Joseph steps closer to Brian. Grandpa, thank you. He whispers in a really small voice. I am completely lost for words. Joseph gives a gentle smile and bows his head slightly. My name is Patricia. I'm 54 years old. I live with my kind but somewhat timid husband, Brian, and a kitten we recently started keeping. I run a hair salon that I inherited from my parents. The salon, supported by the local community, is thriving. We use the first floor of the building, which also serves as our home, for the hair salon, and the second floor as our living space. Every time I hear faint noises from the second floor while I'm working, I start to feel sorry for keeping the kitten in its cage all the time. A few days after we started keeping the kitten, I decided to let it roam freely in the living room instead of keeping it caged. Whenever I go upstairs to check on it during breaks, I'm always surprised by its unexpected actions, like knocking over vases or chewing on clothes. I pride myself on always greeting my clients with a smile and possessing the skills to respond to their requests with the perfect hairstyle. As a result, my hair salon has gained a reputation, attracting clients like Joseph. Of course, I regularly attend seminars and training sessions to improve my skills as a hairstylist, ensuring I never become arrogant. Not only do I focus on my work, but I also cherish the time spent with my beloved family. My husband Brian and I have been married without any major arguments, supporting and understanding each other throughout. Perhaps it's because Brian is 2 years older than me, but I find myself quite spoiled by him. While I am confident in my skills as a hairstylist, managing the inventory of shampoos and other supplies used at the salon is not my strong suit, so I've left that to Brian. He is also more efficient at handling reservation calls, and he has created an environment that allows for online bookings, which I believe has led to an increase in new clients. Brian has a very kind personality. When I fell in love at first sight with an American short-hair kitten at the pet shop and begged to keep it, he looked troubled but eventually agreed. However, even though we've started keeping the kitten, he doesn't try to touch it.
I'm not really good with animals.
He always observes the kitten from a distance. Though he says he's not good with them, they're family, so I figured he would eventually grow to find the kitten cute. I didn't worry about it too much, and named the kitten Marmalade on a whim. My son Donald, his wife Sarah, and my grandson Joseph live nearby, and they get along well. To me, my grandson Joseph is a treasure. Still young, Joseph is very attached to me.
I want to spend more time with Grandma.
His complaints have caused me some difficulty with Sarah. Joseph asks me to cut his hair once a month. When I suggest, "Why don't you ask Mom to cut it?" Joseph, with an innocent smile,
"Because Grandma does it better,"
he replies in a loud voice so that Sarah can hear. Sarah smiled too, but her eyes weren't smiling. After seeing Joseph's finished haircut, she looked somewhat dissatisfied.
"It is indeed well done,"
she mused. I just wanted to enjoy my time with my adorable grandson, but if it meant hurting the pride of my son's wife, I thought about refusing to cut Joseph's hair. However, Joseph became even more attached to me and wanted to see me more. Sarah and Donald are busy with work, and the days Joseph spends at our house have increased, which is probably why. I took temporary leave from the hair salon to spend time with Joseph at the park, cherishing every moment. Yet, Sarah's attitude weighed on my mind. Even though she never said anything, I could tell she clearly disliked it when Joseph and I did something together. One day, I decided to address it directly with Sarah.
"Sarah, since we're both hairstylists, there might be a sense of rivalry, right? But we're family, so why don't we try to get along better?"
Sarah looked surprised for a moment, but then smiled and said, "I'll think about it again. Becoming friends with you might be good for Donald and Joseph." I felt relieved by Sarah's words. I still don't know what the future holds for my relationship with Sarah, but I'm determined to keep valuing the bonds of family. Hoping for more times filled with laughter and play with Joseph, I continue to lead my busy life. One day, Donald's family, who came to visit my house, played with Marmalade, the kitten still full of play, using toys like cat wands. Watching them, I write in the cat care diary I've kept daily since bringing Marmalade home. Suddenly, I remembered that next Sunday is Brian's birthday and called Joseph over. "Hey, let's do something special for Grandpa's birthday. How about we throw a fun party that's different from the usual?" Joseph looked a bit puzzled, but then his eyes sparkled as he looked at me.
"Great idea! Let's make Grandpa's favorite curry and celebrate with everyone."
I laugh and agree with Joseph's suggestion. For the next few days, Joseph had been taking lessons from me to learn how to make curry. I decided to let Joseph do everything, like chopping and frying the ingredients, and I would just give verbal instructions. Joseph, who apparently had never cooked before, seemed unsteady holding a knife, making me want to intervene, but I continued to watch over him diligently. Children grow up so fast, and in just a few days, Joseph had managed to cut the ingredients to a decent size with the knife. Then, finally, the day of Brian's birthday arrives. I told Brian,
"Go out and have fun until the evening,"
and sent him out of the house, then invited Donald's family over. When I asked Joseph if he was sure he could handle making the curry, Sarah, standing beside him, smiled and put her arm around Joseph's shoulder.
"Actually, Joseph has been eating curry almost every day and has really taken to making it. Today, He plans to cook it for a really long time to bring out a deep flavor.
That's really professional. It's a long process to keep stirring the pot to prevent burning, so I'll stand in the kitchen with Joseph. Patricia, could you take care of the decorations and picking up the cake? I thought it was a great idea and nodded deeply. I expressed my gratitude with a smile and decided to leave the curry making to Joseph and Sarah. While they were busy, I went out to take care of the decorations and cake pickup, and when I returned, the delicious aroma of curry filled the room. It smelled delicious. Happy, I headed to the kitchen and found Joseph staring at the curry pot alone. I immediately felt something was off in Joseph's face. His eyes, fixed on the curry, seemed to be brimming with tears, tense.
Joseph, what's wrong? Are you okay?
Joseph mumbled for a while, but finally burst into tears.
Grandma, I messed up.
I was surprised, but placed my hand on Joseph's shoulder.
It's okay, Joseph. It's normal for the curry to not turn out sometimes. What's important is celebrating Grandpa's birthday with all our hearts.
But Grandma, the curry probably isn't tasty. I'm sorry. I want to eat something else today.
What are you talking about?
It might not be a failure, right? How about this? We'll have Grandpa taste it, and if it's good, we'll all eat it. How does that sound? At my suggestion, Joseph looked as if he was about to cry. What a sensitive child. But from what I can see, it's not burnt, and the ingredients are cut to the right size. I wonder what made this curry a failure. Well, if Brian tastes it, I'm sure Joseph will be convinced. When the sky started to turn red as seen from the window, Brian came home. At the same time, Joseph and I explained the situation to Brian as we seated him. So, if I taste it and it's good, we'll all eat it, is that it? Brian took a bite of the curry with a happy expression. He tilted his head slightly. Then, he stood up with the curry and headed straight to the bathroom. I frowned, puzzled, watching Brian's retreating back. After a bit of time, when Brian returned, I said with a slightly irritated expression,
Brian, that curry took 5 hours to make. Why did you pour it out? Apologize.
I spoke in a somewhat pouting manner, but I was actually very upset. Was there really a need to dispose of it, even if there was dissatisfaction with the taste? It could have been adjusted by adding spices or something. Brian looked at me in surprise. Did you eat this?
No, I didn't.
Quietly approaching Brian. Grandpa, thank you. Joseph whispered in a very small voice. I became completely silent, not understanding the situation, and Brian bowed his head with a gentle smile. Sorry. It seems there were nuts in the curry. Grandma has an allergy, so I thought I had to be careful. Hearing those words, my expression froze for a moment. I have a severe nut allergy, and I need to be particularly careful with food. Joseph said he failed at making the curry, but the reason I didn't taste and adjust it myself was because of my allergy. I have always lived cautiously around nuts, not eating anything unless I can be absolutely certain it doesn't contain nuts. It's become a habit, unconsciously being careful about food prepared by others, regardless of whether it's made by family. Usually, when Brian and I eat out, he's the one who checks if there's nuts, not exactly as a taster, but to ensure my safety. After a bad experience with incorrect information from a restaurant staff about nuts, Brian has always taken the initiative to taste for nuts when it's unclear. My nut allergy is that serious. Of course, I've informed my son Donald and his wife Sarah about it. With a mix of surprise and anger, I said,
I've told you about my nut allergy. Why were there nuts?
I said this more to myself than anyone else, but Sarah, who was nearby, spoke up. She seemed a bit flustered and apologized softly.
Sorry, Patricia. Maybe Joseph accidentally added the nuts.
Joseph did? He loves nuts, so he probably didn't know about your allergy and added them, right? Sarah gently said while embracing Joseph's silent shoulders. It was the first time I heard that Joseph liked nuts, and I couldn't hide my surprise. I had never told Joseph about my allergy, but I had mentioned that I disliked nuts, and I remembered Joseph laughing and saying he didn't like them either at some point.
But I had told Joseph that I disliked nuts. Patricia, Joseph loves nuts. It can't be helped. It's good that it didn't turn into a major accident.
I continued to stare at Sarah's face, filled with surprise and suspicion. Joseph had his head bowed deeply. His face was a mix of sadness and remorse. Confused by Joseph's reaction, I wondered what was happening and if I was missing some important fact. Sensing the uneasy atmosphere, Donald suggested we talk about it another day. After all, today is Brian's birthday.
We don't want to ruin the good mood, right?
Donald said, as if treating everyone like children. Then, Brian suggested checking the security camera while stroking his chin with his finger. Surprised?
Eh?
Sarah exclaimed. I didn't miss Sarah turning pale at Brian's suggestion to check the security camera we had recently installed for the cat. I usually only activate the camera while I'm working at the hair salon, but
today, I just happened to leave it on.
Brian muttered to himself.
No, Brian. I'll make sure Joseph learns from his mistake of accidentally putting nuts in, so there's no need to play back the camera.
It's an apology for throwing out the curry that took hours to make. I'd like to see the cooking process that Joseph worked so hard on, Brian said with a gentle smile, but his eyes were not smiling. When the SD card was removed from the camera installed for the cat and inserted into the video recorder of the TV, the playback started. The camera, mounted above the refrigerator, clearly showed the kitchen and the cooking process. This camera also records audio, and Sarah and Joseph could be seen cooking the curry, talking to each other. Sarah looked around restlessly. Let's just go out to eat if there's no food, she suggested. Ignoring her suggestion, Brian turned up the volume of the playback. Amidst the noise, Sarah and Joseph's conversation could be heard. In a rather commanding tone,
Hurry up!
Sarah was seen handing nuts to Joseph while ordering him around. Joseph shook his head, refusing, and pushed the nuts back toward Sarah. Then, Sarah slapped Joseph's shoulder forcefully. Joseph fell to the ground, and quietly, Sarah crushed the nuts finely with a knife on the cutting board. Humming to herself,
We'll make sure the old lady doesn't notice by cooking it well,
she said with a wicked smile, continuing to pulverize the nuts into fine powder. Joseph, with tears in his voice, said, Let's stop. Grandma might suffer. Sarah looked down on Joseph with a very cold expression.
If you tell about this, Mom will get arrested, you know?
Are you okay with that?
I don't want that, but
it's okay.
I just want to be a little mean to Patricia. This will be our secret, between me and you.
Sarah winked and, with a finger raised in front of her face, ignored Joseph, who stood dumbfounded and continued to put the crushed nuts into the curry pot. Knowing full well that if I ate it, I would show an allergic reaction and what kind of situation it would lead to. Brian, Donald, and I were shocked and stared at the footage for a while until Donald, with a voice slightly filled with fear,
Why would you do something like this?
He asked. Realizing that everything was out, Sarah, giving up on deceiving further, crossed her arms and pursed her lips.
Patricia, you have it good, don't you? Owning your hair salon, working freely. You don't even struggle for conversation with regular clients.
I exchanged glances with Brian and Donald, wondering what she was talking about. Sarah, sulking, started complaining about the hair salon where she worked.
The long hours standing are tough, can't properly take breaks, and holidays are determined by client reservations. Can't even take satisfactory vacations due to the store's policies. Meanwhile, Patricia frequently takes breaks, goes for walks, or shops with Joseph. At first, I was grateful, but then it started to irritate me. So, you put nuts in the curry to hurt Patricia? And cooked it for 5 hours to make sure it wasn't noticed.
Brian, usually quiet, gentle, and a bit shy, began to speak more sternly. If I had eaten the nuts, a small amount might only cause my mouth or lips to swell, but eating a large quantity could lead to anaphylactic symptoms, including difficulty breathing. Having been careful about allergies since childhood, I've never experienced severe symptoms, but looking back, Brian seemed more concerned about my diet than I was.
So, if Patricia had eaten the curry and ended up in a dangerous state, you planned to say Joseph accidentally put the nuts in, right?
Everyone present realized the maliciousness of Sarah's actions. Donald was the first to deeply apologize to me.
"Sorry, Mom!"
he shouted and demanded Sarah apologize as well. However, Brian, without changing his expression, took out his mobile phone.
"I'm calling the police,"
he quietly said. The moment the word police was mentioned, Sarah turned pale and widened her eyes in shock, as if thinking that putting nuts in the curry was a minor issue. Donald tried to press down Brian's phone in a panic, but Brian, usually only offering a weak smile, sternly stopped him.
"This is a crime that could have led to a major accident. I think it's appropriate to have a conversation with the police."
After calling the police, I hugged Joseph for a while. Joseph seemed to regret not refusing more strongly, so I kept comforting him. His small body trembled slightly. Not knowing what to say in such a moment, I continued to hold my grandson, facing Sarah, who still seemed unconvinced.
"Listen,"
I began to speak.
"You know what makes me the saddest? Not just the risk of me being in danger, but the fact that you tried to pin the crime on young Joseph and attempted to destroy the life with my beloved family."
At my words, Sarah silently stared off into the distance. Having been exposed, she looked at me with cold eyes, clearly having given up.
"All this fuss about allergies. Nuts are subtly included in various dishes anyway. Do we have to be so cautious about nuts in everything we make here?"
"Yes, we do.
I've always been careful about what I eat." "How troublesome. It's just some bumps on the skin or something minor like that, right?"
While Sarah was reapplying her lipstick, Marmalade, the cat, came from the next room. With its small, agile body, it suddenly started climbing Sarah's dress towards her neck, digging its claws in.
"What?"
Sarah screamed in pain and stood still, as Marmalade seemed fascinated by the necklace around her neck. When Marmalade reached her neck and clung to her desperately, Sarah sneezed loudly. Startled, Marmalade clung on harder, causing Sarah to sneeze continuously and try to pry Marmalade off, but only stretching her clothes as the claws were entangled. Donald lifted Marmalade away, and Sarah, struggling to breathe, sat down heavily and coughed violently. Tearing up and holding her chest, she tried to catch her breath, staring at Marmalade. I lightly rubbed her back, asking,
"Are you okay?"
She nodded after taking a few deep breaths.
"I think you might be allergic to cats. It's similar to hay fever symptoms, but have you ever experienced this before?"
Sarah shook her head slightly and left the room, holding her nose. After washing her face in the bathroom, she returned, drying her face with a towel and glaring at Marmalade resentfully. Brian picked up Marmalade, gently stroking its head. I realized I had never seen Brian holding Marmalade before. Despite its small, hued appearance, it seemed Brian was afraid of marmalade, but now he cradled it in his arms like a precious baby.
Allergies can vary in severity, but they can be very painful and difficult for the person affected. You may have added the nuts lightly, but I want you to understand the seriousness of your actions.
Sarah continued to cough intermittently. Soon, 2 police officers arrived at our house to mediate the situation. Before discussing the specific legal implications of knowingly adding nuts to the curry, the conversation shifted to what I, as the potential victim, expected from Sarah. Sarah is the wife of my dear son. I didn't want to escalate the issue, but I earnestly conveyed that she needs to properly reflect on her actions. The veteran male police officer spoke very calmly, and Sarah, looking exhausted, slowly shared the events leading up to this point and her feelings. It became clear that Sarah had been trying to harm me through Joseph and had been harsh to Joseph when he resisted. This confession was unexpected for Donald, who was listening nearby, and a few months after this incident, Donald initiated a divorce. Donald mentioned,
"I dreamed of running a hair salon together like Dad and Mom, but..."
The words painfully squeezed my heart. A year has passed since then. Regarding the incident with the curry and nuts, I chose not to press criminal charges or sue. However, rumors spread quickly, and Sarah found it impossible to live in the neighborhood, retreating to her parents' home. I harbored no resentment or anger towards Sarah. Instead, I was worried about her and occasionally contacted her via mobile phone. The messages were simple.
"How are you?"
Or,
"Is there anything you need help with?"
Though it might have seemed like meddling, I continued to reach out. For months there was no reply, but one day,
"I'm sorry."
She sent back a single message. She was reflecting and trying to grow, and I truly wanted to forgive her. Since then, Donald and Joseph have come to live with us in this house. After the curry nuts incident, Brian became even more vigilant about what I eat. Blessed with such a protective husband, I feel genuinely happy. We make sure to create happy memories for Joseph, who went through a tough experience, by going out together. While aware of my fortunate position in work, I am also striving for self-improvement, holding even more confidence in myself. Marmalade has grown too big to be called a kitten anymore and sleeps stretching. Marmalade, usually lounging around, comes to check the ingredients whenever I'm about to eat, sniffing around before leaving. I don't think there's any deep meaning to its actions, but feeling protected by so many, I feel happy today too.
"I can't trust you to take care of Mom anymore."
Standing next to Georgie, who said this with a stern expression, Sophia is nodding over and over with a smug smile.
"I, too, think it's better if we live with Georgie and his wife. So, I want you to move out as soon as possible."
Hearing those words, I felt my heart go cold. Anger bubbled up within me towards Sophia, who had always ordered me around, and towards Georgie and his wife, who had never lifted a finger to help. Seeing me like this, Georgie looked down on me with displeasure.
"What's with that look? A disgrace who can't even properly care for Mom acting all high and mighty."
My name is Olivia. I'm 32 years old and work for a major IT company. I live at my parents' house with my father, Kevin, and my mother, Sophia, both 62 years old. I have a very good relationship with Kevin, who has a solid personality. He introduced me to fishing, a hobby of ours, and we often go fishing together on weekends. On the other hand, Sophia has a free-spirited nature. Whenever I planned to relax at home on weekends, she would suddenly barge into my room saying,
"We're going on a trip right now. Get ready immediately."
Without listening to my opinion, she'd take me on trips on a whim, which happened quite frequently. My family also includes my older brother, Georgie, who is 3 years my senior. Like Sophia, Georgie acts before thinking, so his personality clashes with my cautious nature. We fought constantly as children, resulting in a strained sibling relationship. When Georgie and I would fight, Sophia often intervened to mediate, but she has always favored Georgie, telling me I was in the wrong and that I should apologize to him. Now that we're adults, we've stopped fighting, but looking back, it feels like Sophia always preferred Georgie. Georgie ended up marrying Cindy, a colleague from his work, 5 years ago after she became pregnant. This led him to move out of the house. There had been talk of living together, but Cindy refused, so that idea fell through, leaving Kevin, Sophia, and me to live as a trio. 4 years ago, Kevin died in a truck accident while at work. The sudden loss left me emotionally unstable, unable to cope, and it took me a long time to recover. But the shock of losing Kevin was even more profound for Sophia than it was for me. Sophia, who had been a housewife, stopped doing any household chores and secluded herself in her room after the accident. Then, misfortune continued when Sophia misstepped on the house's stairs, tumbling down and suffering severe injuries. Thankfully, it wasn't life-threatening, but she became physically dependent on care. Sophia, further disheartened by her injuries, not only secluded herself in her room but also stopped eating the meals I prepared. When I saw her after a long time, she had become emaciated. Thus, believing this situation wasn't good for Sophia, I resolved to use Kevin's inheritance and my savings to build a barrier-free house that would make living easier for Sophia. The construction proceeded smoothly and, while not a mansion, a functional, barrier-free house suitable for caring for Sophia was completed. Sophia seemed to like it very much and gradually began to regain her usual cheerfulness. Moreover, she couldn't walk around freely, but she started coming out of her room, sitting on the porch to relax. Since then, I've been living busy days, juggling work, household chores, and caring for Sophia. One day after work, I came home to find Georgie and his wife visiting with their child. And the laughter of Sophia and Georgie filled the entrance.
I'm home. Oh, big brother, you're here. Welcome.
As I greeted them, Georgie, seeing me just home, said he wanted to talk. After changing from my suit into casual clothes, I headed to the living room where Georgie and the others were waiting.
What's all this formality about? What's going on?
I asked, and Georgie cheerfully responded.
We were just discussing, and we've decided to live with Mom. So, Olivia, you need to leave this house.
Despite refusing to live together when they got married, this sudden change of policy and the declaration of living with Sophia, along with the unreasonable demand for me to leave, left me unable to comprehend.
This house isn't built for 2 families. With the child and all, we won't have enough rooms. So, Olivia, you need to leave. Besides, you're 32, right? It's not good to keep relying on your parents and living at home forever.
That's right, Olivia.
How can you not see that you're being a burden to Sophia? As an adult, you should have realized this without us having to say anything. It's time to stop depending on your parents and become independent.
While I was being unilaterally criticized by Georgie and Cindy, I wanted to argue that I wasn't actually depending on my parents.
To be honest, I've always wanted to live with Georgie and the rest. He's our precious eldest son, after all. And Olivia, you've always been so cautious and slow, it's been frustrating to watch. Plus, I could never tell what you were thinking, which was creepy.
Sophia suddenly came out with her desire to live with Georgie and their family and revealed what she really thought of me.
Besides, even now, Olivia, you hardly do any housework because you're always busy with work. There's no point in living with Olivia, who is useless. Now that Georgie and his family have said they'll live with me, you should quickly pack your things and leave.
Sophia saw me not as a family member but merely as a convenient housekeeper. Due to my work commitments and coming home late during busy periods, I couldn't adequately keep up with household chores, prompting the suggestion that I leave. I could forgive the harsh words from Georgie and Cindy, but Sophia's words deeply wounded me. Since Kevin passed away, I've struggled to support Sophia, pushing through my fatigue after work to take care of the household and provide care for Sophia. Moreover, Georgie and his wife were living far from the house, so I couldn't rely on them for support. Additionally, my workplace is a bit far from home, requiring a considerable commute time. My job does not accommodate remote work, so I commute daily by train. I had thought many times about moving closer to my company after Kevin died. Yet, despite Sophia's profound grief over losing Kevin and her need for care, I chose to support her. But to her, it seems I was just a housekeeper. Feeling betrayed by Sophia, sadness and anger began to swell within me.
Busy with work and can't even take proper care of Mom, huh? Really, you're such a disgrace. You're failing as a family member. Stop half-assing it and just pack your bags and leave if you're that incompetent.
Hey, Georgie, don't you think calling her a failure as a family member is too much? Don't worry, Olivia. We'll live together and take perfect care of Sophia, just you watch.
Oh, Cindy, that's so reassuring. Unlike Olivia, you make me feel secure. This is how a family should be.
These words from Georgie and the others unleashed the pent-up anger and sadness within me. Understood. I'll get everything sorted and leave you to your freedom. Suppressing various emotions, I said just that and returned to my room. As I ascended the stairs to my room, the voices of Sophia and the others, gossiping about me, could still be heard from the living room. It seemed I was the only one who thought of us as a family. It appeared the others did not consider me part of theirs. Realizing this, the suppressed feelings of anger, sadness, and frustration came flooding back. After entering my room and closing the door, I decided to make a significant phone call, harboring strong emotions. 2 weeks after I left the house, I received a call from Georgie.
Hey. Mom isn't doing any household chores at all. What's going on?
According to Georgie, Sophia wasn't taking care of the house or the children at all, leaving them in a bind. I had assumed this would be the case since Sophia hadn't been doing chores even when I was living there, but it seems Cindy had different expectations. It turns out Cindy had hoped that, despite needing some care, Sophia's condition wasn't serious and that she could handle household chores and look after the grandchildren, allowing Cindy to take it easy. I couldn't help but feel astounded by Cindy's overly optimistic thinking and Georgie's complaints despite agreeing to it so readily. There was no way living together and relying on Mom from the start was going to work. Plus, we knew she needed care all along. What are you complaining about now?
I wasn't told she couldn't move around this much.
Georgie came up with excuses like a child.
And that's not all. People claiming to be from a real estate and construction company have been showing up, asking to see the house, causing us trouble. They're probably scammers, so we've been ignoring them. But they've been sending letters for a while, showing up at the house, and even calling. It's getting really annoying.
Georgie said this in frustration, and I calmly replied,
Oh, that's because I hired a professional service. I've sold the house, so you'll need to move out soon. What? Why are you selling Mom's house without permission? It's our house, don't mess around.
I ignored Georgie's yelling and explained that Sophia was already informed.
Why do you think the house I paid to build is Mom's, let alone yours? I built it, so it's my right to sell it. The buyer wants to demolish it and the surrounding land to build condominiums. They were thrilled to buy it. Why would you do something like that on your own? We're living there right now. Is this how you treat family? Who was it that said to leave because I was useless? Besides, it's my house that I bought, so I can do whatever I want with it.
As I countered Georgie, who tended to ignore inconvenient truths, he seemed to run out of arguments. Georgie suddenly changed his tone, pleading with me in a different voice.
Please! We were wrong. So, stop selling the house and cancel the demolition. Talk to the company and convince them to stop. I'll even let you live here. We'll make the rent cheap and even do some of the housework. How about that? It's not a bad deal, right? I'm saying we'll welcome you back into the family.
Even in this situation, Georgie seemed not to understand his position at all. Despite it being the house I bought, he's talking about charging me rent, assuming I'd do the housework, and saying they'd welcome me back into the family. I was utterly astounded by Georgie's arrogant remarks, informed him that a buyer had already been found and that the sale wouldn't be reversed, and he should leave the house without causing any more trouble for the company, then hung up. Georgie called again shortly after, but I blocked his number. Soon after, I received messages from both Cindy and Sophia, blaming me and asking to stop the sale of the house, but I replied with rejections to both and decided to block Sophia and Georgie's contacts, resolved never to see them again. A colleague who lives near the house I had built later told me about Sophia and Georgie's situation. After our call, the contractors moved in quickly to start demolishing the house. Sophia and the Georgies resisted until the end, trying to prevent the contractors from entering and spreading malicious rumors about illegal construction in the neighborhood, continuing their harassment and interference. I had warned the contractors in advance that these people were difficult and might cause trouble, so they were somewhat prepared. However, overwhelmed by the severity of their malicious harassment, the contractors reached their limit and threatened to call the police if the harassment and interference continued. Faced with cold stares from those looking forward to the new condominium and the mention of the police, Sophia and Georgie stopped their resistance and ceased their harassment. Demolition progressed smoothly after that, and Sophia and Georgie, having lost their house, hastily rented a small apartment nearby. However, Sophia continued not to do any housework or care for the children, and Cindy had to take on both household chores and care. Frustrations in living with Sophia accumulated, leading to daily arguments loud enough for the neighbors to hear. When Cindy could no longer bear it and sought Georgie's advice, he kept avoiding the issue, too busy with work to listen properly. Eventually, Cindy reached her limit and, one night while everyone was asleep, took the children and left Sophia and Georgie's place for good. Georgie frantically tried to contact Cindy but couldn't reach her, finding only a completed divorce application left behind. The apartment they hastily moved into was chosen in a rush, prioritizing speed without properly checking the interior or specifying detailed conditions. As a result, the living situation became difficult for Sophia, who needed care. After Cindy left, Sophia reluctantly began to do household chores but couldn't manage everything due to her injuries. Georgie also started doing household chores out of necessity, but having never done them before, the quality was terrible, leading to daily arguments with Sophia. Georgie, having been left by his wife and children and returning home tired from work, faced the stress of unfamiliar chores and caring for Sophia, appearing older than his actual age and becoming isolated at work. Originally, Georgie had an outgoing personality like Sophia's, with many friends and a fulfilling private life, but his mental state deteriorated due to his current lifestyle, leading to harsh behavior. Gradually, he lost friends and was avoided at work, becoming lonely. Moreover, Sophia has been looking for me recently, shouting my name around the house, becoming the talk of the neighborhood, as a colleague mentioned. As for me, I am now living abroad. My boss had always wanted me to go to our overseas branch, but I had declined due to caring for Sophia, who needed assistance. However, after being driven out of the house, I accepted the overseas transfer without hesitation and left for America. Life in a new environment is full of exciting new challenges. And while it requires a different perspective from America, I find it very rewarding. Before leaving America, a colleague who had long harbored feelings for me confessed, and we started dating. Though we are in a long-distance relationship, we found in each other the best partner to encourage and elevate one another. He proposed that we get married when I return to America, so I eagerly await my return, fully committed to my work. Freed from the troubling relationships of the past, I am savoring happiness and living fulfilling days.
I want to marry Thomas the doctor, so please divorce him, old woman.
One day, a young woman suddenly showed up at our house and said. Elizabeth, a bar girl who is 12 years younger than me, was leaning on my husband Thomas's arm as if seeking his affection.
Sure, but there's one condition,
I said with a smile, looking at both of them.
I'll file for divorce right in front of you. So, will you apply for your marriage certificate in front of me?
The two, momentarily confused by what was said, accepted with a smug smile. Trying not to burst into laughter, I headed to the family court with them to submit the divorce application. My name is Amelia. I'm 34 years old and work as an internist at a hospital. My husband Thomas, who is the same age, also works at the same hospital. Since we both have night shifts, our days off rarely coincide, and we don't have any children yet. While we used to get comments about grandchildren from my parents and parents-in-law, they've pretty much stopped now. Given our busy schedules and the possibility of being called into work unexpectedly, they seem to have accepted that grandchildren are off the table as long as I work at this hospital. Though I feel a bit guilty towards our parents, I find my job very fulfilling. Thomas likes his job too and occasionally attends skill upgrade training sessions. His hard work is well regarded in the hospital, and despite our busy schedules, we lead fulfilling lives. My discontent with Thomas began when the rules we set at the beginning of our marriage started to be ignored. Given our demanding jobs, we had clearly set some rules regarding household chores. One of them was that the person not on night shift would take care of the chores. Since our night shifts are irregular, it's difficult to divide the chores by day or type. Therefore, we decided to base it on the presence or absence of night shifts. Until now, if I was on a night shift, Thomas would cook simple meals and take care of cleaning and laundry. However, lately, even when he's not on night shift, Thomas is often out at night.
Hey, have you been leaving the house more often, even on nights you're not working?
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been invited out for drinks a lot lately because the instructor seems to like me. I used to decline, but it felt bad to always say no, and after I accepted once, the invitations just kept coming. Sorry. I'll try to reduce the frequency.
Indeed, the hospital is hosting various training sessions at this time. Some of which involve external instructors, I remembered, patting Thomas on the shoulder.
It's fine. It means you're just that wanted, right? Plus, the training sessions are only for about 2 more weeks. Don't worry about the house and just do your best.
Sorry, that helps a lot. Thomas is a good listener, which often leads me to share many things with him. It made sense why he was favored by the instructor. Though Thomas said he would use his own allowance for the drinking parties, at that rate, it would quickly run out. So, I decided to cover the expenses for the next 2 weeks from our living expenses. For the next 2 weeks, Thomas started going out at night whenever there were training sessions. Even after the training ended, the night outings continued. I thought he was busy with night shifts, but Ms. Brown, a veteran janitor, told me that wasn't the case.
Thomas hasn't been doing many night shifts lately. We'd prefer to leave it to the men, especially since we have many older staff in our department.
It turned out Thomas was going out at night even when he wasn't on night shift. Just when I was about to confront him, my schedule got so hectic that I didn't have the time to question him. By the time my schedule calmed down, I no longer felt like confronting Thomas. All I wanted was to come home and sleep in my bed. Exhausted, when I returned home after a night shift, there was an unfamiliar woman's umbrella at our house.
I'm home. Thomas, do we have a guest?
Welcome back. Sorry for the suddenness, but there's something we need to talk about.
As I walked into the living room, I saw Thomas sitting on the sofa, with an unknown woman next to him. The woman, who looked like a college student, was snuggling up to Thomas.
Can I leave my bag here?
Yeah, that's fine. But I hope you can make it quick. The atmosphere clearly indicated it wasn't a good conversation, so I sighed and went to leave my belongings in the room. Without changing, I returned to the living room in my work clothes and sat on the sofa facing Thomas and the woman.
I believe this is our first meeting. What brings you here today? Nice to meet you. I'm Elizabeth. I came here today because I want you to divorce Thomas, old woman.
More than being called old woman by someone I just met, it was her lisping speech that irked me. Holding back my confusion, I looked at Thomas, who seemed flustered for a moment but then met my gaze firmly.
Elizabeth works at the bar where I went with the instructor. She's a college student working part-time to pay for her tuition, a very earnest girl. A college student? No offense, but how old are you? Are you even over 21? I'm 22. Old woman and I have a 12-year gap. Interesting, isn't it?
I wanted to challenge her comment about being interesting but resigned myself to glaring at Thomas.
So, you cheat on me while I'm busy and now want to marry a younger girl and ask for a divorce, is that it? Why do you have to say it like it's something bad? I just want to protect Elizabeth for the rest of my life. You can live on your own, but Elizabeth needs me. Thomas, that's so cool.
Watching them engage in affectionate gestures before me made me sigh. Thomas was completely smitten by Elizabeth, finding everything she said adorable, which was incredibly annoying. Every time I called Elizabeth's name, she looked at me with a triumphant, smug smile.
Do you really want to marry this man? A man who goes to bars while married, brags, and lies. A man who takes the sales talk of bars seriously. Are you sure you won't regret it? Of course I want to marry him. After all, Thomas is a doctor and earns a lot. It's terrible to accuse him of lying. He's promised to stop going to bars once we're married. Thomas and I are in love, so it'll be fine.
Hearing this, Thomas hugged Elizabeth as if moved, and they once again retreated into their own world. I stared at Thomas in disbelief, but our eyes never met.
All right then. If you two have decided on that, I'll divorce you. But there's a condition. What's the condition? Division of assets?
At Thomas's words, I shook my head no, and then looked at them with a smile.
We're going to the family court together. I want Elizabeth to witness Thomas and I submitting our divorce application. After the divorce application is accepted, I want you two to apply for your marriage certificate in front of me.
That's all. The two, initially confused by what was said, stood up delighted when they realized that was the only condition. Then, the three of us headed to the family court. At the family court, Thomas and I first submitted our divorce application. I made a somewhat unreasonable request to the staff to expedite the process as much as possible. Later, when the divorce application was accepted, we went to the state office, where Thomas and Elizabeth applied for their marriage certificate. I helped them fill out the application forms and advised them on the necessary identification documents, all the while feeling the curious glances from those around us. The atmosphere of an ex-wife helping the new wife with the paperwork felt awkward, and the staff deliberately avoided looking at us. I felt a bit guilty, but I couldn't help feeling good about myself. Then, I returned home and moved all my belongings to my parents' house. Since I hardly ever shopped due to my demanding job and left the household items behind, there wasn't much to move except for valuables and clothes. I managed to pack everything into suitcases and moved out by car in less than a day. When I got back to my parents' house, they were furious with Thomas, but I calmed them down with a smile.
Don't worry. I'm not letting this go. I'll make sure both of them end up in a miserable situation.
3 days later, I was called to a meeting room through an internal phone line at the hospital reception.
A woman is here insisting on seeing the doctor. What should I do?
Please direct her to an available room. I'll come over as soon as I finish my consultation.
When I arrived at the designated meeting room, unsurprisingly, it was Elizabeth. She was taken aback upon seeing me in my lab coat.
Hello. I've managed to spare 5 minutes between consultations, so let's make this quick, shall we? What do you mean? He wasn't a doctor, and you are, eh?
Elizabeth was panicking, but I didn't have the time to calm her down. I informed Elizabeth with a smile.
Indeed, Thomas works at this hospital, but he is a janitor. He's responsible for everything from cleaning to disinfection, a valued staff member.
What? He lied to me. Elizabeth slammed her fist on the meeting room table, ranting about Thomas. Didn't you listen? I told you, Thomas is a man who brags and lies about his status. Life might be tough from now on, but good luck.
This is a joke. If he's not a doctor, I don't need such a man.
I waved goodbye to the nearly explosive Elizabeth and left the meeting room. I heard her trying to stop me, but I rushed back to my consultation room with full speed. After exchanging high fives with the nurses who knew the situation, I calmed down and called in the next patient. Later, Elizabeth found Thomas working in the hospital and demanded a divorce. Elizabeth shouted that there was no point in being married if he wasn't a doctor, while Thomas loudly claimed that love doesn't care about professions. The spectacle was witnessed by waiting patients and nurses, quickly becoming the talk of the hospital. Despite whispers from onlookers, the heated argument between the two didn't subside until security had to intervene, nearly leading to police involvement. Elizabeth stormed out of the hospital, and Thomas followed her. Elizabeth returned home and caused a neighborhood disturbance by screaming at Thomas to divorce her and claiming the house, along with demanding compensation for being deceived. Around the time our divorce became known in the hospital, I filed for compensation against both of them for the affair. Thomas and Elizabeth came to my parents' house immediately after receiving the letter from the lawyer.
What the heck is this about demanding compensation? You didn't set any conditions other than remarrying Elizabeth. Why are you demanding compensation now?
They barged into the house without hesitation, ranting in front of my parents.
Well, Thomas, you cheated on me while we were married, and you, Elizabeth, knew he was married and still had an affair with him, right? So, of course, I'm going to demand compensation from both of you. Don't be ridiculous. It's not my fault. I won't pay a cent. You're so greedy even though you're a doctor. Your nature is so vile.
Their yelling didn't bother me at all.
Do you know why I included your remarriage in the divorce conditions?
Thomas and Elizabeth looked puzzled.
One reason is to make it clear that Thomas was having an affair while married to me. Normally, getting remarried just a few weeks after a divorce screams that the person was the affair partner. Though you didn't need to do that since you made a scene at the hospital and everyone already knows. The other reason is to ensure I could definitely get compensation from you. I thought Elizabeth was a fake name you used at the bar, and I had no idea where you worked or who you really were. So, I had you fill out the marriage certificate application and helped you with the process. Thanks to that, I got to see all your identification documents. Oh, and when you get married, you have to change your name and address on your driver's license, you know.
While Thomas frowned, Elizabeth's face turned paler.
So, I'll leave the rest to the lawyer. You can try to dodge or run, but don't forget I have all your personal information.
Elizabeth, who works in a bar, must understand the importance of protecting personal information, as it could easily lead to her being stalked. As I smiled, Elizabeth ran off with heavy footsteps. Thomas, looking dumbfounded but irritated at me, followed after Elizabeth. In the now quiet house, I sighed and soothed my angry parents. Elizabeth has been paying the compensation smoothly. Considering she's a college student, I proposed a modest amount, so she should be able to finish paying within the year. Though she wants to divorce Thomas, he's resisting, and neither of them can afford a lawyer for divorce negotiations. Thus, they're separated but not yet divorced. It was also her fault for believing Thomas was a doctor just because she saw a family name similar to his on the hospital's medical staff list. Even though she's still a college student, working in customer service means she should know better than to blur the lines between customers and employees. Perhaps for her, a wealthy doctor was an ideal marriage candidate, but having an affair with a married man was wrong. Even if Thomas agrees to a divorce in the future, she'll have a divorce record. This incident has likely taught her a lesson that destroying someone's family carelessly can lead to dire consequences for herself. As for Thomas, he disappeared from the hospital without me having to do anything. In fact, Thomas, who had left the hospital to follow Elizabeth after she was expelled that day, was in the middle of his shift. As a result, Ms. Brown, a veteran janitor and Thomas's supervisor, was furious. With her face red with anger, she wrote in large letters on Thomas's work schedule that he was absent without permission due to a romantic entanglement. Thanks to that, even the janitors who were off that day came to know about it. Among the staff, that uproar became a major incident, and the patients spread rumors among themselves. As a result, Thomas was the subject of both true and false accusations and ended up being ostracized by everyone, ignored even in greetings, which seemed to break his spirit. One day, he suddenly resigned on his own. Afterward, he apparently returned to his father-in-law house, where his father-in-law, who was already informed of the situation, scolded him severely. There was no apology from Thomas, but I decided not to worry about it anymore since the full amount of compensation I had demanded was deposited by my mother-in-law. In the hospital, I received approaches from male doctors and nurses who heard I was single again, but I declined all of them, thinking I'm okay without marriage for a while. I continue to work as an internist, busy but dedicating time to each of my patients.
Your husband and I are starting a business together. We'll take the sales and the employees.
Dorothy and Brian said this with a nasty smirk. I was at a loss for words. As soon as we graduated from college, we started a small business. And this happened just when the business began to turn a profit at last. The two cornered me in the office, laughing.
Thanks for everything up to now. But we don't need you anymore. Brian and I can handle it ourselves.
Brian nodded to Dorothy's triumphant words. It seemed they had planned to cut me out all along. I clenched my teeth. For considering them as my best friend and a kind husband. But now I see. This is their true nature. If that's the case, so be it. Dorothy. Brian. I have my pride too. And I won't let you trample on it. Bring it on, Dorothy. I'm Karen. 29 years old. I started a small business with Dorothy and Brian, whom I met in college. We call it a handyman service, but mostly we do household chores for others. When we started, there were no other employees, so we managed all the work between the three of us. During that time, Brian proposed to me. I liked him back, so I happily accepted his proposal. Dorothy congratulated us. How kind they both seemed. I thought I was truly blessed with such friends, until the moment I heard this rumor. Dorothy also had feelings for Brian.
I'm off, see you. Be careful on your way,
Brian said to Dorothy in a light tone as she was leaving for work. You get lost easily. I'm fine. I've been to this client's place several times. The car navigation system knows the way perfectly, Dorothy said confidently. Laughter broke out among the employees. Dorothy was everyone's favorite. Ever since college, she was smart but had her ditzy moments, and they loved her for her goofy character. I liked Dorothy too. We hit it off right after entering college and dreamed of starting our own business. Brian joined us midway, and our dream began to take a more concrete shape. And now, here we are, living that dream.
Brian, you should go with her, I'm worried.
Ah, Karen, you sure are demanding. Brian shrugged his shoulders as if he was reluctant. The employees still looked amused. Eventually, an older employee named Jennifer agreed to accompany Dorothy. To be honest, I was a bit uncomfortable around Jennifer. So when she was out of sight, I felt a slight sense of relief. Of course, I would never intend to discriminate against any employee. But Jennifer clearly disliked me. It was obvious. I don't know why.
Jennifer was bad-mouthing you again.
One of the employees whispered to me. It was during break time. I sighed. I don't mind. It's nothing new.
But she was saying awful things. Something like Brian was Dorothy's boyfriend and that you stole him.
What?
I dropped the documents I was holding. They scattered across the table. As I hurriedly gathered them up, I tried to muster a smile.
That's terrible. Brian has only ever been interested in me.
But according to Jennifer, Brian and Dorothy were the real couple, and I was just in the way. But it was Brian who confessed his feelings to me, and Dorothy never said anything about it. It must be just another baseless rumor.
Why does Jennifer always speak ill of you?
I don't know. All I could do was shake my head. Jennifer is 63, a veteran among the staff. All I knew was that she lived with her eldest son and his wife after her husband passed away. Just an ordinary woman. So why does she dislike me? Why spread such awful lies? I don't understand. I don't know how to deal with it because I don't understand. Of course, she wasn't always like this. When did it start? Right, it was. On the way home from a welcome party for Jennifer, which was also a get-together with booze.
Maybe it was that day.
That day?
You know, Dorothy is a lightweight. She suddenly started crying that day. Jennifer was comforting and encouraging her, and it started the day after that.
Jennifer was a normal woman. But after that day, she began to dislike me. Why?
Oh, that makes sense.
Another employee, who had been doing paperwork, chimed in.
It's well known among us. Dorothy badmouths you when she's drunk.
What? I blinked in shock.
Hey, that was supposed to be a secret.
It's not something that can be hidden forever.
Karen, you better be careful around Dorothy. Although, Jennifer is the only one taking the gossip seriously as for now.
The male employee said languidly and returned to his work. I was overwhelmed with disbelief. Dorothy, speaking ill of me.
Yes.
The first employee spoke again, looking uncomfortable.
Dorothy starts talking the moment you're out of sight. It's all made-up stories, terrible gossip.
No way. I thought this must be some kind of joke. Dorothy is my best friend. I can't believe she would say bad things about me.
But the worst part is Brian. Brian?
I wondered why Brian was being brought up in this context. As my expression darkened, the employee continued with difficulty.
Brian, no matter how awful things Dorothy says, he just laughs and seems to enjoy it, even egging her on.
That can't be true.
I had stood up from my chair. I picked up my mobile phone. I called Dorothy.
Hello.
Hey, stop joking around now.
What joke?
Apparently Jennifer is bad-mouthing me because of you. That's a horrible story, right?
Well.
Dorothy paused, seemingly deep in thought. I was hoping she would quickly declare her innocence. Dorothy wouldn't betray me.
Hey, Dorothy.
What?
It was Dorothy's usual, cheerful voice. I felt relieved. After all, what the employees said must be false. Jennifer must have badmouthed me so persistently that everyone started to make up this joke. Seriously.
So you found out all of it?
Huh?
I blurted out in a daze. What did Dorothy just say?
I was planning to gradually increase my allies, but no one else fell for it except Jennifer. Maybe it's time to try something different.
Dorothy, what are you talking about?
Just kidding. Wait, what?
The next moment, Dorothy burst out laughing.
Don't take it seriously, we're friends, right? I would never do such a thing.
Right. I slumped back into my chair, feeling drained. The employees looked at me anxiously. Dorothy was laughing on the other end of the phone. Innocent and lovely Dorothy. She was like everyone's idol. Even now, she's popular among the employees. I like her, too. I thought I did.
It was all a lie, right?
Yes, all lies.
Dorothy's affirmation. Jennifer's attitude, and the employees' rumors. I couldn't tell what was true anymore.
About Jennifer.
I hesitated. Honestly, I didn't want to talk about it. But Jennifer's attitude towards me was strange. I intended to discuss it with Dorothy and Brian.
What's up? She's very harsh towards me. I just think it's going to be hard to work with her moving forward.
You're not thinking of firing her, are you?
Brian looked at me sternly. Dorothy's smile had faded too. I was unable to look into their eyes, and I looked down.
But her gossiping is crossing the line. It must be hard being talked about like that.
Dorothy seemed to sympathize with me. She's kind after all, I thought. Then Dorothy said,
But it's funny to watch, isn't it?
What? Nothing. Karen, think it over. Jennifer is our ace employee, and we've worked together for so long. It would be too cruel to fire her now. I think so too.
Their opinions were the exact opposite of mine. Indeed, many clients have specifically requested Jennifer. Plus, Jennifer was the first employee we hired after starting the company. I have some kind of attachment to her too. But,
like I said before, Jennifer's harshness towards me is because of Dorothy. There are rumors about that. If it's not just me, but Dorothy's reputation falls too.
That's unavoidable,
Dorothy said with a troubled expression.
Because, well, it's the truth. Dorothy. I sighed. Lately, Dorothy has been teasing me excessively. She's manipulating Jennifer to take my place. Even though that can't possibly be true.
Really, Karen, you're too nice.
Brian suddenly said. I looked at him in surprise, and Brian had a smile on his face. A very unpleasant smile. What Dorothy is saying is true. I was dating Dorothy. Brian, not you too.
But along the way, he got greedy.
You were better in both grades and popularity. If anyone was to be the boss, it had to be you. So Brian left me for you, Karen. They took turns speaking. Words I didn't want to hear.
Stop it. But Karen, you're too naive, aren't you? With that attitude, you can't compete with the cunning folks in other companies.
Stop it!
I shouted. My throat hurt from suddenly raising my voice. As I rubbed my throat, Dorothy started laughing.
Just admit it, Karen.
It's all true.
I've been feeding Jennifer all this, and she's been taking it seriously.
I began to tremble at her words.
It's crazy! That's just crazy! Why would you do such thing?
Why? It's obvious, isn't it? Dorothy said, curling her lips.
You stole Brian from me. Not just that. In school, you were always above me in grades. It was always like that. Because of you, I could never be the first.
But Dorothy, you were chosen as the most beautiful girl in college.
That was because I worked hard to please everyone and put on a friendly face. But what about you, Karen? Without any effort, you made it into the top 10. Don't joke with me. Who's joking now?
I had forgotten about the pain in my throat. Tears were streaming from both eyes.
How disgusting. Crying like that.
Exactly. Dorothy's face is still the best. I made a mistake in choosing a partner.
Yes, indeed. Dorothy briefly glared at Brian, probably despising him for his opportunistic nature. But the next moment, she turned a sweet smile and voice to Brian.
Come back to me, Brian.
No.
Dorothy, what are you saying?
Right, even without Karen, the company can go on. Maybe, Dorothy, you should be the president, and I can assist you.
You don't want to be the president yourself?
I don't want a role that just dumps responsibilities on me. I'm more suited to being number 2.
Brian said this casually. This is nonsense.
A nightmare.
I need to wake up quickly. I can't endure this any longer. As I was crouching and crying, Dorothy suddenly said,
Hey, Karen. If you think you've done anything bad to me, I'll give you a chance to atone.
Atone? What sin do I have? About Brian? I really didn't know. But if it's true, I feel sorry. The moment I looked up.
Give me this company and Brian,
Dorothy said, smiling.
Your husband and I are taking over the business. We'll take the sales and employees.
The two of them laughed triumphantly. It was a terrifying smirk. I finally understood. They had been planning on using me all along and to kick me out of the company once I'm no longer needed.
Thanks for your hard work until now. But we don't need you anymore. Brian and I can manage on our own.
That's right, that's right.
I'm remarrying Dorothy, so I don't need you anymore.
Their words made something inside me snap. They really had the nerve to say whatever they wanted. I have my pride too. To be trampled on so cruelly. I won't just walk away quietly. Silently, I glared at them. Then, it was my turn to smile at them.
Suit yourselves.
Oh, how magnanimous of you.
I slipped past the two of them and walked away. Dorothy still looked proud. She must think I'm being docile out of a sense of defeat. Let her interpret it however she wants. We're not friends anymore, anyway.
Brian, I'll write up the divorce papers.
Just like that?
Brian seemed a bit taken aback.
No regrets? You don't fully understand my charm?
Whatever.
Dorothy crossed her legs, looking pleased with herself. I turned back to them and said,
Now, I can go to France without any worries. Huh?
Dorothy let out a surprised exclamation.
France? What's that about? I got a job offer from a company there. I was turning it down because I was responsible for our company. But I guess that doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Go wherever you want.
After saying that, Dorothy added in a lower voice.
What company is it, may I ask?
It is.
I gave them the name. It was a globally renowned corporation that even children would know in this era. Dorothy's voice and expression grew frantic.
Why are you being scouted and not me? I didn't get any offers.
Neither did I.
Brian added, looking puzzled.
Brian, you're just a freebie.
Dorothy bluntly stated.
Seriously?
Brian looked dejected, but in reality, Dorothy and I were the ones who started the business. Brian was more like an assistant, or something like that. He was always like a little chick following behind. Even for Brian, it seems, was upset by Dorothy's manner of speaking.
Dorothy, you weren't invited either. That's right. Karen and I were a team. We've been through everything together, so why is it that Karen is the only one getting attention from big companies?
I should mention, I said, exasperated. Dorothy might have been doing the publicity and noticeable work, but the important, behind-the-scenes work? That was all me. Like sending emails to clients, for example.
Dorothy couldn't be bothered, but I made sure to send a thank you email to every customer. Partly hoping they would use our services again, but mostly because I was happy they chose our company. I kept sending emails, expressing my gratitude. Then, one day,
one of the clients replied. Their grandchild works for the company we just mentioned, and they talked about my work. That led to them wanting to meet me. Come to think of it, you went to France alone last month.
Brian said, suddenly realizing.
Why didn't you tell me sooner?
Well, I thought it was just a trip.
Brian seemed to be making excuses. Dorothy looked furious. Until just now, she thought she had one. But again, it turned out to be my victory.
That's why I'm going to France.
I waved my hand and left the office. I heard Dorothy's screams, but I could care less. After signing the divorce papers as agreed, I arranged for a moving company.
Oh, right.
I came up with an idea. I called another company on my mobile phone. Hello. I'd like to sell all the furniture in my house. I'm used to negotiating. I wrapped up the conversation efficiently. Then, there was a noise at the door. Brian had returned.
Hey, Karen. What is it? This house, you bought it, but if you're going to France, you won't need it, right? So, it's fine. I've already arranged to sell the furniture and the house,
I said cheerfully. Brian screamed.
Why would you do such a thing? Where am I supposed to live from tomorrow?
Go stay with Dorothy,
I said bluntly. I was a bit surprised by my own words. I realized I had no feelings left for Brian.
You're not selling the company too, are you?
That's impossible. Dorothy, my co-owner, would need to agree.
Right. Brian nodded, relieved.
From tomorrow, Dorothy will be running the company alone. Be careful. Dorothy doesn't do anything troublesome. Your threat won't work on me. I'm just warning you,
I said and went to the kitchen.
I'll make dinner.
What?
Until the divorce is finalized, we are still married. And I have no intention of shirking my duties as a wife.
I've always made meals, every day. No matter how busy, I never neglected my household duties. That was my pride. Though today would be the last time I'd cook for Brian.
Well, then.
Tonight's dinner is beef stew. I splurged a little on some good meat this time. I sautéed it with onions and butter, carefully. With tomato salad and juice, tonight's dinner was ready. We ate facing each other. There was hardly any conversation. But the words Brian said strangely stayed with me.
This is the last time I'll eat your cooking, Karen. Did you like it? It was okay.
Brian, ever childish, never praised my cooking until the end. Yet, I was content. I had remained a good wife till the end. The next day, after confirming the divorce papers were processed, I headed to the office. There was a buzz of activity inside. As I entered, one of the employees approached me.
Karen, is it true you're being forced out of the company?
It's true. I explained again that I was leaving the company and heading to France alone. A murmur spread among the employees.
Karen is amazing, as expected.
Karen, we can't run the company without you. I'm quitting this company.
Don't say that.
I tried to calm them. But, except for one, they all insisted on quitting. I'll stay. Of course, it was Jennifer who said that. The youngest employee looked at Jennifer accusingly. I stopped them just as they were about to speak. Instead, I spoke.
Jennifer.
Yes? Her reply was curt, as I had grown accustomed to. In fact, thinking I wouldn't hear her voice again made me somewhat sad.
Dorothy is flashy and loves attention. Brian is indecisive and rarely takes initiative. Please take care of those two. That's what I was planning to.
Jennifer glanced at me and nodded. As if she had figured it out all along.
Even if I'm the only employee left, I will support them. I'm not like the other ungrateful employees. What did you say?
Stop. I held them back while looking around the office. I had done well to grow the company this far. What would become of it now, losing all employees except Jennifer? I wouldn't be there to see it anyways.
Karen! What are you doing in our company?
Dorothy's voice rang out. This place was no longer mine. Her footsteps were my cue to leave the office. Next, I headed to a restaurant arranged by the client. And their grandchild waiting for me. We parted with smiles. But I didn't take up their offer. I still had things to do in Japan.
What do you think you're doing?
Dorothy barged into my office while I was working. I looked at her face while sitting.
What? Karen, weren't you going to France? Why are you starting a business in America?
That's right. In the end, I didn't go to France. Instead, I decided to start over in America. The reason was simple.
How could I leave the employees who admire me in a difficult situation? So, you poach our employees and then act like it's nothing.
I didn't poach anyone. They came to me because they couldn't work under you, Dorothy.
As they declared, all employees except Jennifer quit Dorothy's company. I couldn't just abandon them and go to France alone. I felt obligated to provide them a stable working environment again.
Jennifer is there for you.
One person can't cover everything. And Brian is useless.
Isn't managing a part of your job as a president?
I replied nonchalantly. Dorothy groaned, at a loss for words. I sighed and closed my laptop.
Dorothy, it's not bad to want things. People need ambition. Whether it's born from an inferiority complex or a motivation, I think it's okay.
Are you lecturing me?
That's not the point. As a president, Dorothy, you have a duty to keep Brian and Jennifer away from difficult situations. And of course, if the business fails, it will affect you too. It would make me sad. That company is like a child to me.
I know that.
Dorothy bit her lip.
But I don't know what to do. Jobs that were coming in smoothly are now reducing. The online reviews are terrible. They write it was better with a former president.
Customers are honest.
I shrugged.
Do you send thank you emails to your customers? Are you polite to them at work?
Stop nagging!
Dorothy got angry. Such a child. I was amazed at my lack of judgment. Or maybe Dorothy just fooled me well. Probably both. Before showing her true nature, Dorothy seemed kind and graceful. Who knew she was this selfish and childish? Brian seems lost too.
Another email.
After Dorothy left crying, I opened my laptop again. There was an email from Brian. I didn't even need to check it. He was probably asking if he could join my company, maybe even hinting at reconciliation. How selfish can a man be? Doesn't he feel ashamed to be dependent on a woman? Brian and Dorothy broke up, it seems. A female employee said, bringing a cup of tea.
Is that so? They never remarried. As soon as Brian heard about you starting a new business, he initiated the breakup.
I heard from him directly.
I propped my chin on my hand. I needed to meet Brian to clear things up. That weekend, I called Brian to a cafe near the company. He looked happy and was overly considerate.
It's been a while. How have you been?
Yes, well. If only you and Dorothy in front of me could get it together, I'd feel more at ease. But Brian's attitude suggested that was unlikely.
The food tastes better when I'm looking at your face, Karen. Oh, but the food you cooked was even better. Is that so?
Even though he never once praised my cooking while we were married. I checked my watch and said shortly,
I have no intention of remarrying you, nor hiring you at my company.
Don't say that. For the sake of our past as a couple.
We're no longer a couple.
I dismissed Brian's wishful thinking.
Well then, I'll be going. Wait! If you persist, I might have to consult a lawyer. What?
At the mention of a lawyer, Brian looked frightened. Good. Cowardly Brian wouldn't have the nerve to bother me further. I paid for my share and decided to return to the office. Brian, holding his wallet, shouted,
You called me here and you want to split the bills? Are you offering to pay the full amount?
Leaving a groaning Brian behind, I left the cafe. Unfortunately, the company Dorothy ran went under. Poor reviews and her attitude drove customers away. It's a pity for Jennifer, who lost her job, but it couldn't be helped. Please, hire me at your company. Please, I beg you. Now, they are both bowing their heads to me. After all their arrogance towards me, what could you possibly say to me? Please leave. I said very politely, yet distantly.
There's no place for you here. It's because you started a rival company.
Dorothy exposed her true self again. Brian was shocked, but Dorothy kept shouting.
I know all our customers went to your place. I didn't lead them there.
I spoke in a soothing tone.
Both the employees and the customers made their choices on their own. Do you think I alone could influence so many people?
Dorothy knew the truth deep down. What was right and what was wrong. The mistake of driving me out of the company. Her failure to take her duty as president seriously. It all comes down to one thing, people's trust.
Now, both of you, please leave. If you continue to make a scene, I'll have to call the police. No way!
Brian cried out in pain, while Dorothy cradled her head and crouched down. Leaving those two behind, I returned to my work. There are customers and employees waiting for me. I can't afford to stop. Anthony. That's the name of the person who introduced me to the large corporation. He works there himself and has started contacting me regularly since then. I enjoy talking to him a lot. Informative, and his choice of words is laced with humor. I'm glad I got to know you, Karen. He wrote in one of his emails, in a heartfelt tone. It's been a while since I've had a Japanese friend, being abroad. Friend. That word pained my heart. I was betrayed by those I thought were my closest friends. But I emerged victorious. I'm not weak enough to be outdone and left behind. That incident made me realize my strength. After some hesitation, I replied, I'm also glad to have met you, Anthony. If you ever come back to America, let me know. I'd be happy to have a meal together. I still can't use the word friend. It's not Anthony, but the word friend I'm wary of. Yet, I'm confident that soon I can call Anthony a friend. I can't be rude to someone who opens their heart to me. Especially when I'm starting to trust Anthony. Speaking of trust, the same goes for my employees. I am still grateful to them for believing in me and following me.
Karen.
Yes, yes. Responding to the puppyish call, I stand up from my chair. Feeling myself naturally giving a smile on my face.
The poor couple, they must be here to mooch off their parents since they have no money.
The peaceful Christmas atmosphere was shattered by my brother's harsh words. As he continued to spout insults and demanded more alcohol, I stayed silent. Then, "Do I look familiar to you?" My husband finally spoke up.
"What? I have no reason to know you."
My brother sneered condescendingly.
"Is that so? Well then."
Little did my brother know, these words would be his downfall. "My name is Ava. I work in event planning at a company. I love interacting with people and having fun, and I consider my job my true calling. I've always prioritized work over romance. But there's someone who mocks me for it. That's my brother, Thomas. He works in a prestigious department at a top-tier company. He's always been brilliant, but his pride is too high, and he's looked down on me for years."
"You prioritize work over romance, and you're still single? That's just pathetic. You're just a poor, desperate woman living with her parents. Don't you dare become a burden on me in the future. A lonely life like yours is just tragic."
Thomas never misses a chance to insult me, calling me a workaholic spinster. Our parents try to scold him, but he never shows any remorse, insisting he's only stating the truth. I used to argue back, but it only made things worse. Now, I just ignore him, as we rarely see each other. Despite his taunts, I recently met a man I liked. His name is Timothy. He's a contact person from a client company, unassuming but gentle and meticulous in his work. I was hoping to get closer to him, but then I learned from someone at his company that he had a girlfriend. Her name is Natalie. She's a striking beauty at the reception of his company, well known but also notorious for her relationships. Though it includes some bad language, there are rumors that she's dating more than one person at once. I've also heard that my company has also victims of her. I was curious about her, but I kept my distance, feeling it wasn't my place to interfere. One day, Timothy seemed really down during a meeting.
"Timothy, you don't look well. This isn't urgent. Should we reschedule and I'll send you the details later?"
"No, it's okay. I'm sorry for worrying you. Let's start." He tried to appear upbeat, but it was clear he wasn't himself. "The budget looks about right, don't you think?"
"Timothy? Timothy? Oh, sorry. What were we talking about again? I apologize."
Seeing him so distracted, I decided to call off the meeting. "Let's stop here for today, Timothy. I'll send you the materials and the points we need to review later."
"Ava, I'm really sorry for being such a hassle."
"Don't worry about it. You look unwell, maybe you should go home and rest."
"Thank you so much, but if I don't stay busy, I'll just keep thinking about it."
His words struck a chord with me, and I couldn't help but say, "If there's something on your mind, feel free to talk about it. It might help to get it off your chest."
"I shouldn't burden you with this, Ava. I'm here to listen, no matter what it is. I'd like to help you feel a bit better so you can focus on work."
I tried to lighten the mood, and he managed a small smile.
"Thank you. Maybe I will talk. You see, I had a girlfriend I was thinking of marrying, but she just quit her job to marry another man." "What? Natalie? I hadn't seen her at the reception lately." "You knew about Natalie? She spent way more than she earned, and she often pressured me for expensive gifts. I recently told her to be more mindful about her spending. Then she suddenly cut off all contact. Today, I found out she quit her job."
His story was heartbreaking, and I didn't know what to say.
"I called her, and she answered, but just to say she doesn't need a man who won't pay for her. She threatened to accuse me of stalking if I called again. I was just a cash cow, a victim of her cheating. I'm sorry, this is such a depressing story."
Seeing his forced smile, I felt a surge of anger towards her. What's her deal? How can she treat people like that?
"Oh, I'm sorry, I got a little carried away."
He looked surprised at my outburst, but soon smiled.
"Thank you. You're angry on my behalf. I was too shocked to really get angry. You're right, it's okay to be mad. Ava,
Thanks for listening. I feel a bit better now. He seemed a bit more upbeat.
Timothy, are you free after work today? Times like these call for a drink to blow off some steam.
I invited him for drinks, wanting to cheer him up.
Sorry.
I don't mean to impose. Seeing his shocked face, I suddenly felt embarrassed.
No, thank you. After making you listen to all this, and now you're being so considerate. I guess we need to finish our work by the end of the day, then.
He said with a smile and then looked down at the documents. I resumed the meeting, feeling a mix of embarrassment and happiness. After that day, we got closer. We started chatting over messages and hanging out on our days off. Our ways of thinking were similar, and I enjoyed his company. Just when I started wanting to spend more time with him, my brother suddenly announced he was bringing his fiancée home. I didn't want to see my brother, but my parents insisted I at least greet his fiancée. I was shocked when I saw who it was. His fiancée was Natalie.
What? Natalie? You're marrying my brother?
I blurted out in surprise.
Oh, you're the girl from the event company that often comes to our office. Thomas's sister, right?
She said with a smug smile.
Choosing my brother over Timothy, Natalie, you really have no taste. What?
Natalie was momentarily surprised, but then smirked.
So you knew about him? Of course, I'd choose Thomas, a rising star in a top company, over some plain office worker. What's wrong with choosing a man with better specs?
She spoke without a hint of remorse. My brother joined in the conversation.
That Timothy guy, I've met him a few times through work. Plain and unimpressive. I'm obviously a better catch, so of course, she chose me.
My brother laughed smugly, with Natalie nodding in agreement. I was disgusted by their attitude. Even my parents looked disappointed at their behavior.
I refuse to acknowledge you two who are so arrogant that you look down on others as part of this family. Go ahead with your marriage or whatever, but don't ever come back.
Dad said quietly, effectively disowning them. Enraged, my brother retorted. Even if you disown me, I won't be bothered. Kicking out your eldest son, you'll regret it later. He left with her. I felt relieved that I wouldn't have to see my brother again. But at the same time, I was troubled about whether to tell Timothy about this. After much thought, I decided to talk to him who had the right to know. I called him after work.
Ava, what's wrong? You look so serious.
He looked at me with concern, and I gathered my courage to tell him.
Actually, my brother is getting married, and his fiancée is Natalie.
What?
It seems they met through your company. I accidentally brought you up. She said choosing my successful brother over a regular employee like you was the right choice.
Yeah.
Both my brother and Natalie kept looking down on me and my parents, so my dad disowned them. Is that so? I'm sorry for burdening you with this story.
No, thank you for telling me. I'd be lying if I said I'm not shocked, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. I was surprised by how composed he seemed. Since then, I've realized I was just dazzled by her beauty and didn't see her true colors. Hearing about her marriage really got to me at first, but thanks to you, Ava, I've bounced back. Thank you for telling me. Seeing his smile made me feel relieved.
Ava, it might sound odd to say this now, but would you stay with me?
What? I was shocked by his sudden proposal.
I enjoy being with you, Ava.
It's calming.
Would you consider a serious relationship, with marriage in mind?
Yes, I would be honored. I was truly happy to be dating the man I admired, Timothy. After 2 years of dating, we got married. On our first Christmas as a married couple, we visited my parents' house. Dad was happy to see us and started drinking with him. Dad loves alcohol but can't handle it well. Sure enough, he quickly got drunk, so Timothy took him to another room to take care of him. Right after that, the doorbell rang, and there stood my brother and his wife, who were supposed to be estranged. My brother knew about Dad's weakness for alcohol. He must have timed his visit, guessing Dad would be drunk from drinking since the afternoon on Christmas. Mom, knowing they were supposed to be estranged, was hesitant to let them in. Barging in, my brother said,
"Your dad's probably useless by now. Hurry up and get us some drinks, and serve some fancy food."
Natalie went straight to the bathroom without asking. She said just, "I'll use the restroom." While Mom and I stood dumbfounded. "What's all this noise about?" Timothy came out from the back. My brother glared at Timothy and barked. "Who the hell are you?" "Oh, are you Ava's brother?" "I'm her husband, Timothy." My brother looked at him and sneered.
A perfect match for a plain Jane like Ava. Did you two come to mooch off your parents' house? I don't want to see your faces on Christmas. Get out of here.
My brother had mocked Timothy for being plain and unimpressive, but he didn't seem to remember his face clearly. After telling us to leave, he started demanding food and drinks from Mom. Timothy, who had been watching my brother quietly, spoke up.
"Do you really not recognize me?"
"What?"
"I have no reason to know you,"
my brother said, looking puzzled at Timothy.
"Is that so? You don't remember me? Then, we'll have to cancel our future business dealings."
"What? Business?
Are you out of your mind?"
My brother mocked him, just as Natalie walked in.
"Sorry for the wait. Why is Timothy here?"
Natalie was surprised to see Timothy.
"He's Ava's husband. He's babbling some nonsense about business dealings." "What? You married this girl, Timothy?" "Whatever. As if someone like you could affect Thomas's company's business deals."
Natalie laughed mockingly. Timothy, looking exasperated, said,
"Do you remember my last name?"
"What are you talking about?"
"It's Smith, right? And the name of the president of the parent company of your former employer?"
"What? What's with you all of a sudden?"
"I think it was
Smith."
"Wait. Smith?"
My brother's face went pale in shock.
"Oh please, Thomas. Smith is such a common last name. There's no way this guy is related to the CEO."
Natalie said dismissively, but Timothy pressed on.
"Unfortunately for you, I am the CEO's son. Luckily, there are several Smiths in the company and its parent company, so my identity stayed hidden." "What? Really?" "Yep. I worked at a subsidiary for training, but after getting married, I returned to the parent company. I'm now responsible for several important projects, including the dealings with Thomas's company."
My brother and Natalie were speechless, their faces ashen.
Thomas's company is indeed considered top tier in the industry, but that seems to have bred some arrogant employees. I've heard they've been making unreasonable demands, so I've been thinking about revisiting our dealings." "Wait, Timothy, why didn't you tell me you're the son of a major company CEO?"
Natalie asked in a fluster.
"I planned to tell you once we were engaged. I told Ava after we decided to get married."
"True, he told me after the proposal. I was surprised, but titles don't really matter to me." I answered nonchalantly, and Natalie screamed in disbelief.
"What? If I had known he was the CEO's son, I would have married him." "What do you mean by that?"
My brother, still pale, confronted Natalie. Timothy, looking exasperated, said,
"Please leave, the disowned family members.
You're not welcome here." He ushered them out. My brother, looking pathetic, begged to reconsider the business dealings, but Timothy ignored him and closed the door. The ousted couple argued outside for a while before fleeing under the watchful eyes of the neighbors. It seems that he ran home because he was worried about what his neighbors would notice. Later, Timothy canceled the business dealings with my brother's company. My brother, already known for his poor attitude towards colleagues, was fired for losing a major client. He boasted about finding a new job quickly, but his bad reputation made it difficult. After that incident, Natalie started pestering Timothy, saying,
"I want us to get back together."
Or even,
"I don't mind being just a mistress."
Started following him around. However, when Timothy threatened, "I'll sue you for stalking," she finally stopped. Both my brother and his wife were extravagant spenders. Even after his dismissal, they couldn't adjust their lifestyle and quickly became engulfed in debt. My brother repeatedly reached out for help, but I ignored all his requests. Eventually, tired of his constant contact, I deleted all his contact information. I have no idea what happened to them after that. I vowed never to become someone who looks down on others like them. Together with Timothy, I decided to build a happy and respectful family.
Sucking up to your grandkid is creepy. Pensioners like you should only show up at weddings or funerals.
It happened on my adorable grandson's 4th birthday. My son's wife, in other words, my daughter-in-law said so disdainfully and nonchalantly. I just planned a dinner party to celebrate my only grandchild's birthday. Amidst that, my daughter-in-law, who has always disliked me, finally showed her true colors in front of her son. If that's what she wants, I'll gladly cut ties. Are you sure? Don't come back regretting it later, I said with a smile, revealing a certain truth to her. I am Harper, 65 years old. Recently, my husband passed away. He just turned 75 last month. He had been suffering from a chronic illness and was given a limited time to live a few years ago. Despite that, he stayed by my side for 2 years longer than the doctors predicted. I am sad that my beloved husband is no longer with me, but I am truly grateful for his efforts until the end. Thankfully, I inherited several properties from my father, so I had rental income. Even when my husband couldn't work due to his illness, we could live comfortably because of that income. Besides, even after his death, there's another reason I can live normally. That is the existence of our 2 sons. We have the eldest son Andrew, and the younger Robert. Both are married, and Andrew has a 4-year-old son, David. The fact that my sons live relatively close eases my loneliness. With my husband's funeral over, life is slowly returning to normal. One day, Andrew and his wife Madison came to visit my house. This house is also Andrew's childhood home, but he rarely visits, so I asked him what was up. What's going on? You didn't even call. I'm sorting Dad's things, and the living room's a mess. We need to talk about something important with you. It's okay if it's messy. I just want to welcome you guys properly. Oh, where's David? He's at kindergarten, so it's fine. We're coming in. Although I tried to stop them, they proceeded down the hallway. Following Andrew, Madison silently tagged along. I followed them to the living room. They were already deeply seated on the sofa, with Madison fiddling with her mobile phone, legs crossed. I wonder what this talk is about. Madison seems as grumpy as ever today. I hope it's nothing too serious. I've never had a good impression of Madison since the beginning of their marriage. She's beautiful and has a great figure, but completely lacks charm. Even my husband had a troubled look when she came to greet us for their wedding. Our relationship has been far from good. I was worried for reasons like those. I was surprised when Andrew broke the silence. Mom, I want to be clear about this. Why don't you live with us? Live together? I was taken aback by his unexpected proposal. Sensing something from my expression, he hastily explained.
I know, it's shocking to hear all of a sudden. But I've been worried, Mom. Ever since Dad died, I thought you might be lonely.
Well, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't lonely.
Right? You're getting older, and living with us would be safer. You'd feel more secure with us around, right?
That's true, but you guys have your own life, right? Interrupting me, he said with a broad smile.
It's okay, no worries.
He then took my hand and continued happily.
Mom, Madison agrees with moving in together.
Madison does?
Actually, it was Madison who first suggested we live together.
Really? Madison suggested living together? Given her attitude so far, it seemed like she didn't like me at all. Or maybe she's just not good at expressing herself? Various questions crossed my mind, but I was genuinely curious about her feelings. I turned to her and asked tentatively, Madison. Andrew said so, but is it true that you suggested we live together? It's true. I thought you might be lonely on your own. Is that so? Thank you.
We thought living together would make David happy too. Don't read too much into it, okay?
Though her tone was brisk, it didn't seem malicious. From the way the conversation was going, it appeared true that she suggested living together. Afterward, they kept persuading me.
We're worried, so we'd like to move in with you as soon as possible.
I was surprised by the sudden proposal, but since they insisted, I agreed to live together. We continued our conversation as they led, and finally decided to start living together the following week. Once the moving day was decided, they left briskly. Alone in the room, I resumed sorting my husband's belongings. While looking at family trip photos from years ago, I got lost in thought. I decided on the spot to live together, but was it really the right choice? Madison said that, but adding 3 people suddenly to this house, where it was just my husband and me. But living together with Andrew's family, that's a happy thing, right? I tried to convince myself that my choice wasn't wrong, though it felt almost forced. Despite my anxieties, I decided to shift my mindset toward living together. A week later, the day of their move was busy from the morning. The movers arrived while I was eating lunch, as they hadn't informed me of the time. In a rush to help with the moving, Andrew and the others were nowhere to be seen. In the end, I had to direct the movers on my own. Several hours later, they finally arrived. I wish you had told me if you were going to be late. I told Andrew, but Madison retorted before he could.
Excuse me, but unlike you, we're busy, you know? You're always home and has time to spare, so be a little flexible.
But there was so much stuff. It was really hard to direct the movers alone.
We're offering to live with you, and you complain about this? Harper, you don't realize how lucky you are.
I didn't mean.
Whatever, we're tired, so please get dinner ready.
Saying that, she lay on the living room sofa and started playing games. Her drastic change from her usual quiet demeanor left me stunned. Confused, I approached Andrew and asked in a low voice,
Andrew, Madison suggested living together, right? Because she was worried about me being alone.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we moved in early.
But what she just said, you heard it too, right? It doesn't sound like she's worried about me.
Just let it go. Mom, don't do anything unnecessary. Just listen to what Madison says and do what you want.
Andrew.
He wouldn't even make eye contact. At that moment, I began to feel uneasy. 2 weeks after we started living together, my fears soon became a reality. My conversations with Andrew, who had said he was worried, were minimal. Madison had quit her part-time job, which she had held until the move. Becoming a housewife didn't mean she helped with housework. She just lazed around the house every day, not even touching the laundry. From grocery shopping to cooking, to cleaning every room, everything was left to me. Even if I asked Andrew, he wouldn't say anything to her, perhaps afraid of being disliked. So, I decided to speak up to her directly.
Madison, I hate to ask, but could you at least take care of your own things and help out with the housework?
What? Harper, are you ordering me around?
It's not an order. It's just that the current situation is too much for me.
I don't care. Aren't you grateful that we're living with you? Just so you know, Harper, you are lucky. You should be aware of that.
She dismissed my words mockingly, not taking them seriously. At a loss for words, she added one more thing.
Oh, by the way, David's birthday is coming up, so please book a nice restaurant. No casual eateries or anything like that.
Madison, you just want to use me for your convenience.
What are you talking about? It's for David. You should be happy to celebrate your grandson's birthday, right?
But still.
Anyway, please do it. If you don't make a reservation, I'll tell David it's his grandmother's fault.
How could you?
With those threatening words, she laughed with a sarcastic smile. And she left the living room, looking down on me. What's going on? Wanting to live together because they're worried, that was a lie. She just wants to use me. Using David as a threat is unbelievable. A rebellious spirit grew within me against her. But thinking of David, I couldn't put my feelings first. Reluctantly, I decided to book a certain restaurant for my dear grandson. The restaurant was one of the properties I had inherited from my father. When I signed the contract, I was made the nominal owner at the suggestion of the restaurant. I called the restaurant and explained the situation, and they agreed to open a private room. I just want to have a wonderful time with everyone for my grandson's birthday. With that thought, I buried my complex feelings towards Madison deep in my heart. A month later, David's birthday arrived. Andrew, Madison, David, and I went to the reserved restaurant. We were shown to a private room and handed menus. Seeing the prices listed, Andrew and Madison exchanged surprised looks. Apparently, since they had never been to such a place, they started to complain quietly.
It's too expensive. This price is ridiculous.
Indeed, that restaurant was on the pricey side but offers quality to match. However, it was not just for adults. They also had delicious dishes that children could enjoy. I was sure David will be delighted. Thinking so, I had reserved a birthday cake over the phone. I smiled at David, who was fidgeting excitedly.
David, today is your birthday, so you can order whatever you like.
Really, Grandma? Can I?
Of course. They have your favorite hamburgers and gratin. Pick whatever you like.
Yay! Thanks, Grandma.
His unclouded smile instantly purified my heart. On the other hand, his parents were glaring at me the whole time. When it comes to ordering, they chose the cheapest pasta. When I asked if that was all they wanted, they nodded reluctantly. I wanted them to enjoy something delicious, so I selected some of my recommended dishes like appetizers, salads, carpaccio, and a meat main course. As I ordered, they looked at me incredulously, probably thinking they had to pay. In fact, I had been only asked by Madison to reserve the place. But wanting to treat everyone to that restaurant's food, I had no intention of making them pay. I just wanted my grandson to enjoy delicious food and have a happy time on his birthday. When I use the restaurant, I don't pay the bill. Instead, the amount I spend on meals is deducted from the monthly rent. No need to worry about money. With that thought, we waited for the food to arrive. During that time, Andrew and Madison hardly spoke, just whispering to each other. Usually, Madison interrupts, so I took that chance to fully enjoy my time with David. Several hours later, the meal ended, and finally, the cake was brought in. At the sight of the impressive cake, David exclaimed in delight.
Wow!
In contrast to my joyful grandson, his parents wore bitter expressions. Thinking that their mood was ruining the birthday party, I called the waiter and ordered a dessert platter for the adults. Hearing that, Madison burst out with her face turning red.
Hey! Can you stop ordering whatever you want? You're just going to make us pay, right?
What are you talking about? I never intended.
Shut up! I saw earlier you didn't bring your usual wallet. I was foolish to ask an old lady like you. I can't believe you reserved such an expensive restaurant.
Madison, please, that's rude to the restaurant. Don't worry about the bill. And David is so happy.
Sucking up to your grandkid is creepy. Pensioners like you should only show up at weddings or funerals.
That was when I first realized. The immense anger was growing within me. I asked the waiter to take David out of the private room. Facing Andrew and Madison, I spoke in the coldest tone possible.
Enough. How can you say such things without any remorse? Suddenly moving in, not doing housework, not contributing financially. And now you tell me to not get involved? This is no joke.
What? It's because you reserve this place. Ordering expensive items. You're just trying to get back at us, right?
This is my restaurant, you know?
What?
This is one of the properties I inherited from my father. I became the owner just in name when I signed the contract. The chef was grateful to him.
As I explained, Andrew's face turned pale. By the time I finished, he was in shock. Meanwhile, realizing she wouldn't have to pay, Madison spoke up loudly.
Oh. So we don't have to pay? Because it's your treat.
Yes, it is. But this will be the last time.
Huh?
Her face froze at my words. I made it clear to her. I'm fed up with living with a couple like you. I won't take care of you anymore. I don't even want to breathe the same air. I was foolish to be deceived by your words about being worried. Don't ever involve me in your lives again.
Wait, Harper, what are you talking about?
I'm grateful you gave birth to David. But this is my limit. I won't have anything to do with you guys, even at weddings or funerals. Don't contact me, no matter what. You guys are no longer my son or daughter. The two of them teared up. I quickly gathered my things, breathing heavily. As I was leaving, David asked with looking puzzled.
Grandma, are you leaving?
I'm sorry, David. We might not meet again, but take care.
Really? I don't want to not see you.
Thank you. Grandma will always pray for your happiness. While I saw him look sad, I stroked his head and left the restaurant. I didn't look back, afraid my resolve would waver. Later, I called my younger son Robert and explained everything. He was furious with Andrew and advised me to end the cohabitation immediately. Upon arriving home, I packed the essentials and headed to Robert's house. They offered to let me stay until I found a new place. A few days later, I decided to sell the family home. It was sad to let go of the house full of memories with my husband, but I didn't want to leave Andrew's family free rein anymore. The house was quickly sold, and they were soon to be evicted. Without me bearing the living expenses, their life changed drastically. Although they managed to move into another place, apparently, they constantly fought over money. Robert received requests for help but blocked Andrew's number, knowing the situation. The only regret I had was David, but it was a fitting outcome for them. As for me, I'm enjoying a peaceful life in my new house. Robert's family visits me regularly, so I don't feel lonely. I plan to enjoy my independent life while I'm still physically able.